She was 18 the day her father traded her away, not with rage or tears or even shame, but with the same tired indifference he used when selling a goat or bargaining over wheat, his cracked hands resting on the table as if this decision weighed no more than the sack of flour placed beside him, the coarse fabric stained with dust, heavy enough to feed the house through winter, yet never heavy enough to ease the hollow place inside her chest where dignity used to live. Her name was Eliza, though no one asked for it that day. And as she stood in the doorway of the crumbling farmhouse, barefoot on frozen dirt, she realized her life had been reduced to silence, to numbers, to survival math written in hunger and debt, because her father's voice did not shake when he said, "Take her," and the man across from him did not smile when he nodded, only lifted the sack as proof that the bargain was complete. And just like that, the girl who once sang while hanging laundry, who dreamed of rivers and open skies, was handed over like excess weight the family could no longer afford to carry. The wagon ride away from her home was long and wordless, the wheels creaking in rhythm with her heart, and though she tried to remember the sound of her mother's voice or the warmth of her childhood bed, all she could feel was the sharp certainty that she had been erased, that whatever worth she once had been ground down by poverty until it could be exchanged for flour and nothing more. And when the wagon finally stopped, it was not at the home of the man who bought her, but at a ranch spread wide beneath a pale sky, where fences stretched like scars across the land, and the wind carried the smell of hay and horses, and something unfamiliar, quiet strength maybe, and that was when she first saw him, standing near the corral with sleeves rolled up and hands rough from work, his posture steady as the land itself. A rancher named Thomas Hale, who had not come to claim a girl but to stop a wrong. He had overheard at the mill earlier that morning, a wrong spoken casually over grain prices and debts, a wrong that sat so heavily in his chest he could not ignore it. He watched as the trader dismounted and reached for Eliza's arm, saw the way she flinched before contact was made, not dramatically, but with the subtle reflex of someone already trained to expect pain, and something inside Thomas hardened, not with anger alone, but with resolve, as he stepped forward and said calmly, "She's not part of your trade." And the trader laughed at first, a short dismissive sound, until Thomas placed his hand on the wagon rail, firm and unmoving, and repeated himself with a steadiness that made the air feel suddenly tight, explaining that the flour would be returned, that debts could be settled another way, that no man had the right to own what was not his to give. And as voices rose and threats hovered unspoken, Eliza stood frozen, certain this was another cruel turn, another moment where men argued over her body as if she were already gone. But when the trader finally spat into the dirt and left, muttering about meddling fools and bad business, Thomas turned to her not with triumph, but with something gentler, asking her name as if it mattered, offering her water as if she were a guest rather than a burden. And for the first time that day, her throat closed not from fear but from confusion, because no one had asked her anything since the sack of flour had been lifted from the table. He did not promise her salvation or romance or an easy life, only safety for the night, work if she wanted it, and choice where there had been none. And though Eliza had learned not to trust kindness, she followed him into the ranch house, because exhaustion had stripped her of resistance, and because something in his eyes did not hunger for her obedience, only her survival. The house was simple, sturdy, built to withstand storms rather than impress visitors, and as she sat by the fire with a blanket around her shoulders, Thomas explained that he had known hunger too, that his own father had once lost everything and nearly lost his soul trying to keep them fed, and that some lines, once crossed, cost more than starvation ever could. And as Eliza listened, she felt the faintest crack appear in the wall she had built around herself, not enough to let hope flood in, but enough to let breath return, because for the first time since childhood, someone spoke to her as if she were not a problem to be solved, but a person whose pain had meaning. Still, that night, as she lay awake on a narrow bed in a clean room, fear returned in waves, because being saved did not erase what had already been done, and worth, once taken, did not simply reappear because one man chose differently. Yet somewhere between the howl of the wind outside and the steady quiet of the ranch settling into sleep, Eliza realized that though her father had given her away like grain measured by weight, this stranger had given her something back without asking for anything in return. Not freedom yet, not healing yet, but the dangerous, fragile possibility that she had never truly been worth only a sack of flour at all. Morning came slowly to the ranch, pale light slipping through the small window and settling across Eliza's face, like a question she wasn't sure how to answer, because waking up without fear felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous, and for a long moment she lay still, listening for raised voices or heavy footsteps that never came, only the distant lowing of cattle and the rhythmic clink of a bucket against wood, sounds of work, honest and unhurried. And when she finally stepped outside, wrapped in the same borrowed coat, she found Thomas already moving through his morning routine, not stopping when he saw her, not staring, simply nodding as if her presence there made sense, as if she belonged in the world he occupied. And that quiet acceptance unsettled her more than cruelty ever had, because cruelty she understood, but dignity felt like a language she had forgotten how to speak. Days passed that way, with Thomas offering work and never commands, showing her how to mend fences, tend horses, and keep accounts, never hovering, never testing her gratitude. And each task returned something small to her, strength in her hands, steadiness in her step, the memory of what it felt like to contribute without being owned. And yet at night the past crept back in whispers, her father's averted eyes, the weight of the sack hitting the table, the unspoken truth that hunger had mattered more than she did. And one evening, as the sky burned red over the fields, the truth finally spilled out of her in a quiet, shaking confession. Not dramatic, not angry, just raw, and Thomas listened without interruption, without offering excuses for a man who had failed her, and when she finished, he said only this: what he did was wrong. And it doesn't define you. Words so simple they broke something open inside her, because no one had ever separated her worth from her circumstances before. Trouble came, as it always does when injustice is challenged, when the trader returned with men and threats and talk of ownership, accusing Thomas of interference and theft. But Thomas stood firm, backed by law, by witnesses, by a spine forged from years of doing the hard right instead of the easy wrong. And Eliza watched from the porch as men who once would have dragged her away now hesitated, not because she was suddenly powerful, but because someone else had chosen to stand between her and the world. And when they finally left, defeated and bitter, she realized something important. Protection was not possession, and safety did not require surrender. Seasons turned, winter loosening its grip, and with time, Eliza's voice grew stronger, her laughter returning in small, surprised bursts, her reflection in the water no longer a stranger, and Thomas, for his part, never claimed credit, never acted like a savior, but treated her independence as the goal from the beginning, helping her learn to read contracts, save money, make choices, until one day he placed a small pouch in her hand, not payment but proof of earnings, and told her she could leave whenever she wished, and the realization struck her then sharp and clear that staying would now be a choice, not a sentence. She did not leave right away, not because she was afraid, but because healing takes time, and roots grow slowly when the soil has been poor. Yet when she finally returned to her old village months later, it was not in shame but in strength, standing taller, speaking clearly, meeting her father's eyes when he could barely meet hers. And she did not ask for apologies she no longer needed, only returned a sack of flour to the table and said, "This is what you traded me for, not in bitterness, but in truth." and she walked away lighter than she had arrived, because closure is not forgiveness. It is freedom. Eliza built a life afterward that bore no resemblance to the one she had been given away from. A small home, honest work, a sense of self that could not be bartered, and though Thomas remained part of her life, not as an owner, not as a rescuer, but as a constant, what mattered most was what she carried within herself now, the unshakable knowledge that worth is not measured by hunger, by desperation, or by what others are willing to pay, but by the simple, unyielding truth of being human. And if this story stirred something in you, if you believe that even one act of courage can rewrite a life, then remember this feeling, carry it forward, and subscribe to the channel.